Rudy's Revelation.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Rudy's Revelation podcast, finding revelation in the news and meaning in media. It's December 19th, 2025. So today in the news, the Brown MIT shooter is a Portuguese man with a grudge. Also, Trump reclassifies marijuana as a Schedule III drug, lessening federal criminal charges and also classifying it as a medical plant. RFK Jr. also banning sexual reassignment surgeries for minors. And more news coming up. We're going to talk about the kerfuffle at TPUSA between Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson. So let's get into the news for today. Today's headlines. Friday, happy Friday, December 19th. 2025. So we're going to start with some Trump news. Just the News is reporting Trump defies odds, achieves economic triple play with rate cuts, tariffs, and cooling inflation. So the CPI just came in and people were complaining about, it's always the Democrats and the liberals. You know, they cause the inflation and then they complain about how we arrive at the CPI or the inflation numbers. One America News has inflation slowing to 2.7%, lower than expected, down from its Biden era peak. Now, we had problems with numbers late in the year because of the shutdown. So regardless of what you think of this number, it still is an improvement. Inflation has been hovering around 3%. That's its usual number. The Fed and many people like to see it down at 2 in an effort to cut rates. The inflation, of course, has been exacerbated by a couple different things, but not tariffs. This is a lingering hangover from the Biden administration. The reasoning being is even though late in his presidency, inflation got much lower, Biden also went on a spending spree in his last 6 months in office. People should be aware of that. And so any inflation that was caused by that spending or borrowing really wouldn't come into effect until the Trump presidency. And so despite what Trump's trying to do to lower inflation, to make the economy better, it's going to happen. He was fighting against what Biden did in his last term, the tail end of his term. I really think that there should be a prohibition of spending late in a presidential term, especially in the lame duck session, but we'll see. So One America News goes on to say that the Department of Labor reported on Thursday that Consumer Price Index, CPI, lifted in November by 2.7% from last year. The rate was lower than Wall Street's projected 3.1% increase. And why they call it an increase is inflation is always increasing. The point is your growth should be higher than inflation. Deflationary cycles aren't good in modern economics, but I don't want to digress into that. But still, the number is lower than what was projected. There was a slight uptick in the market yesterday, which was great. Story also goes on to say the new report is the first look at the CPI since the September report was released in October, noting that the price had risen 3% from a year earlier and projecting that November CPI to match that increase. Meanwhile, core inflation, which excludes volatile food and energy categories, is reportedly at 2.6, coming in lower than the projected 3%. So both numbers lower. Inflation is indeed coming down. We're getting over the Biden hangover. And next month, all the items in the big, beautiful bill will come into play. And that includes the tax cuts, et cetera, et cetera. Keep in mind, though, that the tax, the savings that people will get won't even be realized till next year. So it's going to start the fiscal year in the January and go through the year. But when tax time comes, now bartenders, people that receive tips, waitresses, people that receive Social Security, overtime, the people that earn that money won't really realize it till next year when they pay zero in that for those monies. Of course, I look at my monitor and it's frozen, so I don't know what's happening there. So we're going to try another thing. Yesterday, I had a little bit of a technical difficulty. There's something with OBS, there's like a glitch where it manifests audio channels and that just start playing. So let's see if I can't. And I think it was when I went to one of my scenes there, I had an included channel. Let's just check. All right. Anyway, getting back to the news, the big story today, and before I get to the big story today, I should say, I just wanted to touch on this, which is, I think, one of the greatest achievements in decades. One American News, Trump signs executive order to expedite marijuana rescheduling to Schedule 3, stops short of full legalization. This is immense for the simple reason that states might very well, or it looks like states that haven't legalized marijuana will lessen the prosecution of marijuana users specifically because of the reduce in schedule. Also, federal law enforcement against Schedule 3, plus the federal law enforcement against banking and financing of marijuana will also lessen. This is a huge development because marijuana is a plant. Criminalizing a plant or the use of a plant or the possession of a plant, which I believe does have medicinal uses. I mean, maybe you don't smoke marijuana, maybe you do. Well, in any case, the American people find use for it, recreationally or otherwise. Usually, recreational users use it to reduce anxiety, among other things, maybe even become more creative in some senses. But I think I think this is important for the simple reason is this was my go-to because politically it's fraught that you could at least reduce the schedule, right? Because it shouldn't be a Schedule 1 on the same level as heroin or other drugs like that. All right. Yep. So, okay. I just wanted to make sure I had a monitor going there. It's like I can't escape the glitching. But moving on to what did Trump say here about marijuana? Oh, he said, um, Americans deserve access to the best medical treatments and research infrastructure in the world. In 2023, the Food and Drug Administration completed a review of the landscape of the medical use of marijuana and found significant support or scientific support for its use to treat anorexia related to a medical condition, nausea and vomiting and pain, related in cancer treatment. Chronic pain affects nearly 1 in 4 United States adults and more than 1 in 3 United States seniors, and 6 in 10 people who use medical marijuana report doing so to manage pain or discomfort from chemotherapy, et cetera, et cetera. I just don't believe, well, I'm a libertarian, so I don't believe in penalizing people that are using a plant or what have you, or even using drugs for the large part. But, you have to be able to police the trafficking of substances, et cetera, possession in some cases. But it certainly should be compassionate. Drug addiction, drug use, for the most part, alcoholism is a disease. So it should be treated in kind. The problem is that most of like people on the street and stuff, people with mental conditions, mental health conditions, tend to use drugs and alcohol. We don't know. It could very well have been caused by the drugs and alcohol. But most people on the street have mental health conditions and then are exacerbated by drugs. But the same thing can happen with pharmaceutical drugs as well. It's not, that people put illicit drugs in a different category. It's all the same substance. That people use the euphemism of substance abuse. That's the way I look at it. All right, let's get to the main story here. So I got led down a trail there with this Mustafa Carbouche guy. Wasn't the shooter. It serves me right for looking at non-corroborated, non-news sources. However, it was corroborated the fact that people online, and in this case, somebody on the ground there helped with the investigation that led to the shooter. One of the things I just want to point out before I go any further is I found it strange that the suspect stood on the sidewalk and was strolling around and stood on the sidewalk with his hands behind his back. That's a strictly European strolling thing. My German uncle used to do that. That's a European thing. You could automatically pick out a European tourist in the United States when they're strolling down the boardwalk with their hands behind their backs. So he did that, and that caused me to pause. And so I thought, that's a European thing. So I found that very strange, and it turns out that I'm right. Apparently, it is a Portuguese guy, and I'm going to get into this story right now. Suspect at Brown University shooting is found dead in New Hampshire. This is the New York Times. The man, a 48-year-old former Brown student, was found with a self-inflicted gunshot wound in a storage unit. They believe he was also connected to the killing of the MIT professor this week. Colonel Perez, who is the lead law enforcement officer in Providence, Rhode Island, identified the person as Claudio Manuel Neves Valente. He said the man was a 48-year-old former Brown student whose last known address was in Miami, and that the motive was not clear for the attack at Brown or the shooting Monday night of the MIT professor in Brookline, Massachusetts. Now, he says the motive isn't clear. To me, it's clear. This is a grudge incident. We don't know why the guy was pissed, so we don't know the exact motive, but it appears that this guy went to school with the MIT professor in Portugal, and so knew about him. They were the same age, and he also attended Brown University 20 years ago, probably at the same time the MIT professor was attending school. We don't know if there's a connection there, Brown, but obviously the guy was been simmering over something for some time. Had a grudge against Brown University, studied in that very building. So we don't know. The suspect had a brief stint as a graduate student in the early 2000s, spent considerable time in the campus building where the Brown attack unfolded. So it turns out that the young girl who was vice president of the Republicans was not an intended target. Now, if you want to put your conspiracy lens on, you could certainly do it now and say, well, this could be a patsy, a psyop, developed to cover for the true intention of the attack. You know, if you have evidence alluding to that, that would be great. I'm not sure. I'm just not sure. So the body of a man suspected in the killing of two students at Brown University and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology professor was found in a storage unit he had rented in New Hampshire. But a Reddit post led to the breakthrough in the Brown shooting investigation. A Reddit user, see, this was unclear in the beginning because it's the same person. A Reddit user provided information that identified Claudio Manuel Neves Valente as not only the suspect in the campus shooting, but also as the murderer of an MIT professor. He wrote, "I'm being dead serious. The police need to look at a gray Nissan with Florida plates, possibly a rental." The Reddit user posted, according to affidavit, which was made public yesterday. So the affidavit was for the warrant, specifically for the rent-a-car. Now, the guy also switched plates, but the car was picked up as it went through a toll booth going into New Hampshire from Massachusetts, and that's what led them there. They also ran the guy's name in the Massachusetts the New Hampshire database, and turned out that's what turned up the storage unit that was rented out in his name. They went to the storage unit. They found the rent-a-car there. They reviewed surveillance footage from the storage unit place. They saw him go in, and they did not see him come out. And so they went in cautiously. Apparently, he was in his storage unit dead. Now, let's get back to how they cracked the case. New York Post, shootings at Brown University, MIT cracked by homeless hero, now entitled to a $50,000 reward, supposedly. He's only known as John. Homeless hero. What's up with this homeless hero? He's the one that was making the Reddit posts. So not only was he putting out his internet musings. The thing is like he was on the ground there. He should have just went to the police department, not posted on Reddit. Apparently, this guy's a little bit mentally challenged. This guy, John, is homeless, but he lives on the Brown campus, possibly in that building where the attack occurred. We're going to get to that in just a second. And works part-time in a custodial capacity. I think he's just I guess he's autistic savant or something. He has some mental health issues. But apparently he was a brilliant student, and so Brown was like, sure, you could live in the building. We'll just make you an employee. John's tip first came to light when he started posting on Reddit as he recognized the images of the perp that had been blasted out by authorities in the wake of Saturday's bloodshed. He wrote it, like I said before, he wrote, I'm being dead serious. The police need to look at a gray Nissan with Florida plates, possibly a rental. I know because he used his key fob to open the car, approached it, and then something prompted him to back away. Probably the fact that he knew he was being followed by this guy. And so this guy and John had a run-in. They were playing cat and mouse around the university and had a run-in in the bathroom of the building. After John's image was put out by police, and as the hunt continued, he sat down with investigators and divulged that he had a strange cat and mouse interaction with a gunman the day of the shooting. He said that he encountered Neves Valente in the bathroom of Brown's engineering building just hours before the attack and noted the suspect's clothing was inappropriate and inadequate for the weather. So we're not even really sure what that means. He was wearing a jacket. Maybe it wasn't that cold, and he was wearing a hat and a mask and gloves. Maybe the fact that he was wearing gloves. In any case, the guy, John, found it strange. Good for him. See it, say it. See something, say something. But he didn't say anything. He posted it on Reddit at first. So in any case, sources told Fox News that John had been living in the basement of the engineering building at the time. He later bumped into Neves Valente outside the building and opted to follow him. Your car is back. He yelled out at the perp, your car is back there. Why are you circling the block? Which he found odd. So this guy was very conscious of people's behavior, which you should be, because if someone's behavior seems out of whack, let's just say, abnormal, that there's a motive for it. There's a reason people act differently or act strangely. I mean, law enforcement is all schooled on this all the time, so it's not surprising. Problem with this monitor, too. So if you're watching, I hope the stream is coming through. So the suspect responded to John and said, I don't know you from nobody. Why are you harassing me? And so it's always when people are up to no good, it's always, why are you harassing me? When you're asking people why they're acting strangely, that somehow that's harassment. I've had just recently also an interchange with somebody that I live near. That's acted strangely, and so I called him out on it, and he said, why are you harassing me? I go, I'm not harassing you. All right, moving on. So Mediaite has the story, who is Claudio Neves Valente, Brown University shooting suspect found dead in storage unit. He was admitted to Brown's graduate school to study a Master's of Science PhD program in physics beginning on September 1st, 2000, and he took a leave of absence effective April 2001, so just only a few months later, 6 months later, before formally withdrawing effective July 31st, 2003. So 2 years later. Now, the question is, was the MIT professor Nuno Loureiro, who was killed by this guy, was he attending Brown at the same time? So apparently they were studying in the same field, and it's not sure why after 6 months, Neves Valente took a leave of absence and then formally withdrawing 2 years later. Why is that? All right, so the guy got into the country. This guy, Neves Valente, got into the country on a student visa to study at Brown, then applied for the visa lottery for permanent residence and was accepted. So now Trump, according to the Associated Press, suspends green card lottery program that let Brown University MIT shooting suspect into the U.S. Good. As far as I'm concerned, and many people feel this way, is that we should have had an immigration moratorium, at least for a year, until we figured out what the fuck was going on. Hopefully that still might happen. I think it's less likely now. Neves Valente had studied at Brown on a student visa beginning in 2000, according to an affidavit from the Providence police detective. 2017, he was issued a diversity immigration visa and months later obtained a legal permanent resident status, according to the affidavit. It was not immediately clear where he was between taking leave of absence from the school in 2001 and getting the visa in 2017. Yeah, he was, maybe he was living in the country. It's hard to say. We're going to find out in the coming days what transpired. Why he had to leave Brown after 6 months, why he formally withdrew after 2 years. Could he just not hack it? Was there a family issue? Did he have to go back to Portugal? Maybe he had a relative that was sick. Or maybe he just bailed. But I don't understand if he went back to Portugal. And so how long he had a student visa beginning in 2000? So for 17 years, I mean, it doesn't take 17 years to go to school. So he had that student visa for 17 years. This whole process should be looked at. The AP article goes on to say lottery winners are invited to apply for a green card. They're interviewed at consulates and subject to the same requirements and vetting as other green card applicants. Trump has long opposed the diversity visa lottery. So I guess it's called the DV1, Diversity Visa 1, this program. Kristi Noem's announcement is the latest example of using tragedy to advance immigration policy goals, according to the Associated Press, after an Afghan man was identified as a gunman in a fatal attack on National Guard members in November. Trump's administration imposed sweeping rules against immigration from Afghanistan and other countries, rightly so. There are many American citizens that are dying and being severely injured at the hands of foreign nationals who are in this country under dubious claims for dubious means. So people shouldn't, American citizens shouldn't have to put up with that. All right, let's get to the one of the other special articles here briefly. Mediaite Turning Point USA conference turns into war between Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson as they trade blows. I'm not even going to get into what Ben Shapiro said. It's actually kind of funny. But anyway, he said Ben Shapiro went on to say something about Nick Fuentes as an evil troll and that building him up is an act of moral imbecility. And that is precisely what Tucker Carlson did. He built Nick Fuentes up and he sought to take responsibility. He ought to take responsibility for that. For glazing pornographer and alleged sex trafficker Andrew Tate, or for mainstreaming fake historian and pseudo-Nazi apologist Daryl Cooper. That's my problem with Ben Shapiro is first of all, I don't really like him. Just his whole POV and just the way he speaks, and he's really quite dismissive of other people have a right to have opinions. But the fact that he calls Andrew Tate a pornographer because he was providing opportunity for young women to go on OnlyFans, and for that opportunity, he was getting a cut. Okay, I guess that's pornography. Okay. This is the guy who was a virgin until he met his wife. So obviously he doesn't understand pornography or much else about anything outside his little world. I mean, he's going to be the moralist here. I don't think it's illegal. In any case, the funny thing is Tucker Carlson then showed up after Shapiro, and he goes, I just got here and I feel like I missed something in the first part of the program. Hope I didn't miss anything meaningful. And of course he laughs and he goes, I don't think I did. No, I'm just kidding. I watched it. I laughed. So he's laughing at the moralist Ben Shapiro. And then Tucker went on to say the whole like Red Guard cultural revolution thing that we so hated and feared on the left, that we did everything we could to usher in a new time where you could actually have a debate. I mean, this kind of the whole point of Charlie Kirk's public life, and I think that he died for it. I really believe that, and I know that a lot about it because the last several months of Charlie's life were devoted in part to arguing about this event. In fact, this speech, my speech here, which he asked me to do earlier this year, this summer, and I was immediately put under just immense pressure from people who give money to Turning Point. I would assume good people, but who wanted him to take me off the roster. Also pointed out that Charlie stood firm in his often stated and deeply held belief that people should be able to debate. I kind of thought we reached the end of that cancel culture as far as I'm concerned. And I'm not going to play by those rules. I'm not going to engage in that. Yeah, like I said, I don't like Ben Shapiro. He never smoked pot. He never had sex before his wife. You know, I believe in morals. I'm just not much of a moralist. I believe we live in a secular country, for better or for worse, and people have different points of view, and then those points of view should be respected, even if you don't like them. Period. And Tucker Carlson wasn't the one espousing these views, was he? No, he has a talk show, a podcast, and he has guests on his podcast. Oh my God, glazing someone. I mean, come on. Who cares? I don't care about Nick Fuentes. I mean, come on. It's just, I care about Nick Fuentes as much as I care about Ben Shapiro or Sam Harris for that matter. It's like, bring me something I can use. You know, this browbeating moralism or in Nick Fuentes' case, you know, like he's got the answer. He doesn't have the answer. He's too young and obviously too unwise to have the answer. That's why I don't want to even engage in this back and forth. It was like the thing between Candace Owens and Erica Kirk. It's like, who fucking cares? Bring something to the fore and then go back to what you were doing. I don't know. Federalist. Contrary to the New York Times, homeschooling is a much better alternative to public schools. A man ought to have a really, really good reason to write a New York Times piece trashing his dead mother. Stephen Merrill Block did not, but he went ahead anyway with a piece headlined, "Homeschooled Kids Are Not All Right." And that is necessarily context and contrast. Homeschooling can go wrong. Government-run schools constantly go wrong, from sexual abuse to academic failure to ideological insanity, of which gender ideology is not only the latest, most loony expression. And despite Democrat claims to prioritize education, the very worst schools tend to be in solid blue cities and states. While he acknowledges that abuse at schools does happen, Block wants us to use the few years he was homeschooled to attack homeschooling as a whole, and he does not spend much time addressing the alternatives. I had the best of both worlds. I went to school, I went to public school, but when I came home, I was homeschooled. And I learned a lot more from my parents than I ever did at school. Because your parents, maybe because my parents cared, but also they were telling me things in a fashion that I guess school used to be, right? They broke it down in geography and history specifically. And then they said, you're interested in things? Look, here are the books you look at. I started reading periodicals, started reading National Geographic when I was 7 or 8. And then by the time I was 12, I was reading the New York Times. But I was 7 to 8 years old. By the time I was 10, I was reading Hard News and Newsweek and Time Magazine. Why? Because my parents read. And when I asked the question, my parents were like, "You want to know the answer? It's in these books." And they didn't just go, "It's in that book," and then let me alone. They took the book and they open it up and they go, here's the answer. Homeschooling is a hedge against bad public schooling. And public schooling is a hedge against bad homeschooling. So I think you should have both. Kids that are encouraged at home academically do better. I still didn't do better in school. I didn't like school. It's too regimented. I have a problem with authority. And a lot of things didn't seem to matter. It's like before you even introduce kids into reading, how joyful reading could be, you're immediately pushing them into the classics. Who the fuck wants to read Shakespeare when you're in 8th grade? It's doesn't make any sense. Anyway, back with the headlines here. Just the news. Department of Justice sues Georgia Secretary of State Raffensperger for voting record. The U.S. Department of Justice is suing Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger for access to the state's voter rolls. Now, you might have heard about Brad Raffensperger during the 2020 election. He's the guy that Trump called up and said, "What's going on over there? I need to find X many votes." And the federal government under Biden was trying to prosecute Trump to say, because he said that, he wanted Raffensperger to commit fraud. That's not true. He was trying to do what other states have done, specifically Democrat states, is because what happens is they take votes from certain red districts and they never make it to the counting room. And sometimes if they're waiting for a Democrat to win and their fifth day of counting votes, all of a sudden oh my God, look, and this happened during 2020. We found, Trump was winning, but now we found these ballots in this locked closet, and they're all for Biden, so he wins. Anyway, the Justice Department said information provided by Raffensperger's office did not include all the information requested, including the voter's full name, date of birth, residential address, state driver's license number, or the last four digits of their social security numbers. Georgia has been having fraudulent ever since Stacey Abrams stuck her nose in politics down there. We've had problems, including the runoff between Herschel Walker and Raphael Warnock during the 2020 election. The same stuff is because they don't have verification of who votes. They just have registered voters and the same number of ballots to match that number, but they can't. There's no chain of custody from the voter to the ballot to the counter. It's obviously fraud, and Raffensperger is a Republican. And Georgia is led by Republicans, so what does that tell you? It tells you that Republicans are in on this as well. You're trying to defeat Trump, for the establishment, for the system that has an agenda for us all, and if you really knew what it was, you wouldn't like it. All right, more news. Wall Street Journal, Wisconsin judge convicted of obstructing immigration agents in courthouse. Hannah Dugan found guilty on one count, acquitted on another. An unusual federal prosecution over an incident involving immigrant wanted by authorities. If you didn't know what happened in this case, so this illegal immigrant was facing criminal charges in Hannah Dugan's court. ICE showed up at the court and she escorted this illegal immigrant out of her courtroom into the back hallway that houses her chambers and the prosecutor's officers, etc., which is a secure area, and then out an exit to evade ICE immigration. That's obstruction. And she was found by a jury of her peers immediately. Didn't take days for them to figure it out. They were told what obstruction is. She obviously committed obstruction. And with the way the law is, the supremacy clause, is that if federal agents come into a state, you have to assist them. But states and or municipalities disagree with that. I mean, so there is some gray area, do we have to assist them? No, but you can't obstruct them. It's criminal. And the left is just full of fucking criminals because they want to do whatever they want to do, regardless of whether it's against the law or not. That's like when Maggie Brennan on Face the Nation during the 2020 election said illegals are banned or barred from voting in federal elections because it's the law. Just because something's a law doesn't mean people won't do it. Yeah, felons aren't supposed to have firearms, but they do. People that aren't citizens aren't allowed to possess firearms, but they do. Just because there's a law against something doesn't prohibit. The only thing that prohibits people from doing things that are against the law is enforcement. The existence of a law is no law. It's only enforcement that makes it material. More from Just the News. Former Voice of America employee pleads guilty to making threats against Marjorie Taylor Greene. Seth Jason, 64, oh my gosh, should know better, worked for Voice of America when he made 8 phone calls to Greene's congressional office between October 2023 and January 2025, just this year. He pleaded guilty on Thursday to making anonymous telephonic threats against Greene. The Justice Department said Jason's threats against Green escalated over time and were the worst around the time of President Trump's inauguration in January, telling her that she would not see the inaugural. Criminal by a 64-year-old. You don't know better. These people are so possessed with TDS. You know, you almost want to go back to the day where people didn't care about politics. Now they care too much. You know, you only should care about things within your vision. I don't want to go that far, but I told my brother yesterday, it's like, don't worry about things you don't have control over. Right? You don't have control over Marjorie Taylor Greene, you know, to the point that if you live in her district, you can vote or not vote for her. But otherwise, it's not up to you. Go fuck yourself. You know, you have control over your little universe. That's it. Speaking of criminals, One American News resurfaced anti-Semitic tweets force Mamdani's appointee to resign after one day of work. Catherine Almonte da Costa, New York City's mayor-elect Zoran Mamdani's former director of appointments, submitted her resignation just one day after being hired by Mamdani following the resurfacing of anti-Semitic tweets from 2011 and 2012. Big surprise there. That's over a decade ago. People are crazy. You know, I don't really have hate for anybody. I hate behavior. I don't really hate people. But she was the director of appointments, so she was the one that was going to be in charge of building his cabinet, his administration, and she's out. So, and there's still some talk about him hiring for chief counsel this guy who is also anti-Semitic. So this might be a canary in the coal mine, so to speak. So getting to the other top story here. Associated Press, Trump administration moves to cut off transgender care for children. U.S. Department of Health and Human Services on Thursday unveiled a series of regulatory actions designed to effectively ban gender-affirming care for minors, building on broad Trump administration restrictions on transgender Americans. You know what I liked during RFK's press conference? He called it what I call it. It's gender-rejecting care, not gender-affirming care. Right? Your gender or your sex, your sex rejecting care. That's not really care, surgeries. So RFK was calling it what I call is gender rejecting. It's not gender affirming. If it was gender affirming care, what it would do is it would give people hormones for the sex that they are, maybe to help reverse what we all view as the cause of this problem, which is endocrine disrupting chemicals that make people feel like they're another sex. And like I said, if you feel like you're a woman and you're an adult, but you acknowledge that I'm not a woman, but I feel like a woman and I want to become a woman, and you're an adult, I guess you could do whatever the hell you want. But feeling like something doesn't make you something. If you feel like you're the Queen of England, that doesn't make you the Queen of England. Sure, if you're an adult, you could get robes, royal robes, a crown, a scepter, and you could march around the street and say, I feel like the Queen of England. I am the Queen of England. You're not. Right? People keep wanting to argue, oh, there's scientific evidence that really there's another gender inside you. And okay. Unless somehow you have different chromosomes, but you're still born with a penis. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I'm a libertarian. You can do whatever you want as an adult. Children, on the other hand, do not have the right to do whatever the hell they want to do. They're in the charge of an adult. They're a caretaker. They're guardian. All right, One American News, RFK Jr. introduces measure to end transgender treatments for minors nationwide. Our children deserve better. Under my leadership, and answering President Trump's call to action, the federal government will do everything in its power to stop unsafe, irreversible practices that put our children at risk. Kennedy stated. So I had some questions yesterday about whether or not this announcement involved hormonal treatments, and I believe it might. Mehmet Oz chimes in. Fox News has the headline, Mehmet Oz declares America's children aren't lab mice and crackdown on gender transition treatments. Department of Health and Human Services announced new regulatory actions banning Medicaid funding for gender transition treatments for minors. So it's treatment. So it includes hormone treatments. At least it bans the use of Medicaid funding for it. And it should. That's like Medicaid doesn't cover cosmetic surgery, at least in most cases. So what is this? Is a choice. It's elective. Shouldn't cover elective things. All right, moving on. One American News. House passes GOP healthcare bill aimed at lowering costs by 11%. The bill, titled the Lower Healthcare Premiums for All Americans Act, represents a Republican response to the Democrats' push for the 3-year extension of the Enhanced Affordable Care Act tax credits, which are set to expire on December 31st. It's not just that, that's the COVID era, which was increased during COVID, and just like the mail-in ballots, once it's in, it gets to stay. It's like we're electing for this because they're extraordinary circumstances, and then when those extraordinary circumstances go away, the fix does not. The fix stays, because if it involves money, the Democrats want to keep it, liberals want to keep it. The GOP bill does not address the imminent rise in premiums for ACA enrollees. It's only affecting a small, relatively small, and millions of people, but small in the grand scheme of things, of Americans, as most Republicans are opposed to the policy without introducing significant reforms. And one of those reforms was you have to at least scale back to the pre-COVID levels. Democrats say no. Obamacare has been an unmitigated disaster for 15 years, crushing families with high premiums and rampant fraud while enriching insurance companies. Indeed. It's time for conservatives to get serious about advancing policies that can become law and therefore actually reduce costs, said August Pfluger, who is the Republican Study Committee chair. Democrats are worried about 6% of our country. See, it's a small percentage of our country. Republicans are worried about 100% of the country, and premiums are going up, and not a single Republican has ever voted for Obamacare, Pfluger added. So why would you expect them to do so now? You wouldn't. So the Democrats are in the minority, and they're big surprise. You don't care about Obamacare? No. The only good thing that came out of Obamacare was that insurance companies had to exist applicants with existing conditions. And it should be without a usury type of increase. You know what I mean? But they had to take applicants. So that was one good thing that came out of Obamacare. The rest can go. The subsidies, and they were paying for that shit out of Freddie and Fannie Mac, or Freddie and Fannie Mae. just, they knew they were screwing the taxpayer and they were screwing the recipient as well, because it didn't do anything. It was a giveaway to insurance companies. It didn't do anything to lower prices. It subsidized costs for some people. I think the HSA is a better way to go. You know, I don't know. Insurance is a scam, first of all. You might need it, but you don't use it. You shouldn't want to use it. So, I don't know. I can't go down that road right now. Fox News Business. TikTok reaches agreement over new U.S. joint venture with closing set for 2026. New joint venture is scheduled to close on January 22nd, 2026. So what is this? The White House previously indicated Oracle and Silver Lake would be among the main owners of TikTok US. A White House official said at the time that the ByteDance would own less than 20% of the firm, while existing shareholders and global firms would account for the remainder of the company's ownership. ByteDance investors would hold only 35% stake per the report. Well, good, because we celebrate capitalism here, not communism. So the country or Americans are not going to own, well, will own over a majority. And that's the important part. What TikTok is going to be like, whether it's going to include the algorithm or how the particulars of this is going to work, but Trump wins again. Couple more stories before we close out here. Stay with me. Zero Hedge, Russia sentences UK mercenary to 13 years in prison camp after capturing Ukraine. Here's the issue, as I stated previously. Same thing with Americans. These are special forces operators who get killed or captured in Ukraine. Right? These are regular army troops that are sanitized, because we're not supposed to have boots in the ground fighting Russians, but we have been. We have been since 2014. And the Russians know this. And so, that's why they say, quote unquote, mercenary. It's a UK soldier. But he's not wearing a British Armed Forces uniform with rank and all that stuff. But he is there. They're usually caught because they're embedded with Ukrainian troops, the special forces, and they usually help coordinate the high-tech aspects of war, airstrikes, drone strikes, missile strikes, the artillery shit the Ukrainians could do on their own, but some of the more high-tech weaponry and aircraft, air power, using satellite imagery and so forth and so on, is all done by special forces embedded with Ukrainians. My state on the war has been the same the whole time. I know that NATO and the West were pushing for regime change in Russia. Russia was at the table. They had relented after the fall of the Cold War. They go, we want to be a partner with the West. And the West said, sure, as NATO crept closer and closer to Russia's border. And then Russia said, well, what are you doing? And so the beef between Russia and the West has always been stop NATO's expansion eastward. We're not expanding eastward. We're not expanding eastward. We're not interested. NATO is not interested in Ukraine. NATO will be Ukraine will be part of NATO. That was their last straw, because that's just too close. And Ukraine's situated on top of the Black Sea. It poses a real strategic issue for Russia and their sphere of influence. So I blame the West, of course. If the West stopped where they said they were going to stop many times, there wouldn't have been an issue. It's the dwindling sphere of influence of Russia that people in the West cheer But people in Russia don't cheer that, and this was really the last straw. So more about the Brits, though. Zero hedge. British teachers to spot misogyny in boys and target them for re-education. Real problem. For years, U.S. officials turned a blind eye to rape gangs because it might look racist to crack down on foreigners. Now, suddenly, the real problem is young boys who are radicalized into becoming misogynists. They have to look. Teachers will be given a training to spot and tackle misogyny, while high-risk pupils could be sent on behavior courses as part of a government strategy to have violence against women and girls. It is Orwellian because if you buy into this sort of shit, you must be fucking crazy. If people, and that's what we try to do here every day, is to put shit into context. All right, this is the context of what's happening. Things don't happen in a vacuum. There's an agenda, and you see what's happening in Europe, and it's going to come here to the United States. And who wants that? I have misogyny. You should treat women the way they deserve to be treated. They're not equal. Women are not equal to men. That's all I have to say. Not saying that they're better or worse than men. They shouldn't be subservient to men from my point of view, but some people believe they should. People don't have to believe what I believe. They should know what I know, but they don't have to believe what I believe. And knowing becomes wisdom. Wisdom becomes understanding. Understanding becomes overstanding. And when you have overstanding, you see the world for what it really is, without bias or conviction. Last story up. Futurism, Waymo spotted driving wrong way down busy street. I'm not interested in a robotic future by any means. People want the Jetsons. I don't care for that. I like people. I like humans. What did I used to? I hate people, love humanity. Like I said, I really hate behavior, but it sounds better when you say you hate people, you love humanity. I love humanity. I love the aspects that make people humane. There's sort of a kindred spirit, or it should be among people. But when people don't recognize that, it's hard to reciprocate. But I'm not interested in a cold Silicon future. I could care less. I don't care much for technology. I learn about it, I adapt with it, but I could be in a cabin on the lake with no electricity, go fishing every day, read books. It's just fine. Although I don't really like writing, I never really liked, I like to write. Don't get me wrong, I like to write. But the physical action of writing, I was never a fan of. And I never became a great typist, even though I took typing in high school. Still even though I was in journalism, there's a lot of hunter and peckers in journalism. And now with voice-activated scripting, I find that you can just talk and then edit, which is great. Anyway, thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, engage the platform, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. Remember, you're under attack, psychologically and biologically. So stay hip to the trick. Join me every day, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m., live on Rumble. Man, I can't spit it out today. Happy Friday. Have a great weekend. And I'll see you next week. Respect.
You can't handle the truth. Can I have rights?